Shabbat Shalom. First, let me say that if you think I'm using my radio voice or I'm incredibly dehydrated, I've had a bit of a hoarse throat for the last day or so. It's a side effect of 3 kids. So nothing terrible, but I may drink a lot and I may pause a little bit. There's a passage in the Talmud that has a humbling message when we think back, a Talmud written 1,000 more years ago. Think about how relevant and wise some of these people who had no sense of modern technology or current culture were. The passage reads as following. It's about dreams. Chalom afal pi. Dreams, even dreams, it says, kulo einu mitkayem. Even dreams, when you have them and work on them and think they're fulfilled, they're not done yet. Dreams, it implies, come in parts. And so you realize a dream and it's not actually finished. I believe, I'll share more in a moment as to why I want to share that quote tonight. I believe that's very much where we are. But first, let me tell you a story from 200 years ago. Not far down the road, in the Midwest, on the day after Rosh Hashanah, a man by the name of Mordechai Noah, described by a Jewish historian as America's best-known Jew of the time, and a man, I think it's safe to say, with a healthy ego. On the day after Rosh Hashanah in 1825, I shared with many of you at the annual meeting, the same time that the Erie Canal was about to be finished. This man stood up, dressed up as a judge, and spoke to the world on Grand Island in the Niagara River. And he said, "I proclaim to Jews throughout the world that we are establishing a city of refuge here for Jewish immigrants. We will call that city Ararat, after the mountain where the biblical Noah's Ark came to rest, because with the Erie Canal being open, Jews from Europe should make their way to the Midwest in America, particularly to Ararat, New York." Now, how many of you have been to the big Jewish community on Ararat, New York? You're not alone in that. The only remnants of his plan are a 300-pound cornerstone with a Hebrew inscription placed on that day in 1825. Mordechai Noah learned the hard way that just because you build it does not mean they will come. What works, what overwhelmingly attracted Jewish immigrants to American cities like Akron? Personal invitations. There are archives of letters written at the very same time that Mordechai Noah built his city of refuge, placed his cornerstone, and put in the papers an invitation to the world. Letters written that very same day from individuals to their family and friends in Europe. One man wrote to his parents, "How on earth is it possible to live under a government where you cannot even enjoy the simple privileges that correspond to being a human being? If only you and all the Israelites knew how well you can live in this country. No one would live where you are anymore." Tonight, we celebrate the beginning of a dream. For years, even before the pandemic, our congregation dreamt about creating a smaller, more intimate, sacred space for holidays and life cycle events. Many of you helped us rearrange chairs in this room so that we could sit in the round with those wooden podium, the wooden stage that Max Weiner built for us. We rearranged chairs here. Then we joined for Sukkot. We rented out space in the metro parks. Many of you joined us there so that we could be out pushing picnic tables together under the trees for Sukkot. Many times we've gathered in our library, in the lobby of our building, and especially these last 2 years, in our parking lot, under the canopy. Wherever we could gather, we have tried. This weekend, we celebrate the part of this dream that has become a reality. the construction of our Mishkan. But if we want the dream to be more than an uninhabited Jewish island in the middle of the Niagara River, we have to invite each other to it. And so perhaps it's now that the real work begins. In fact, we might say now the real work continues, because this project has only succeeded because of the personal invitations that were made. The design of the Mishkan, our Mishkan, long before the name was determined, was drawn when this building was drawn. This was not a new idea. In fact, it's, I would guess, Keith would know, a decade old when someone envisioned that we should have an outdoor space that's covered next to our building. But 10 years later, it came to fruition. Why? Because Keith called Sue. He made an invitation. She said no. Eventually, not so long after, she said, "It's a good idea." She turned to those around her, to Greg, and then they decided, this can't just be our project. We want others to be involved. And so they started inviting people that they knew well, their friends, and people they didn't know very well. People that they hadn't known in our congregation yet, but whom they wanted to be involved. And people said yes. More than 30 people, which by my weird math, I would calculate to say represent 10% of the member families in this congregation, said yes to being a part of this project during a pandemic. And I have watched from my very privileged place in our office as people come and go from our parking lot. And I would say, again, doing my own math here, I don't think in the last 2.5 years there has been a project that has had as much participation from as many people as the creation of this outdoor sanctuary that we celebrate this weekend. But again, I say, not because someone made a beautiful drawing, it was because someone made the right invitation. And dare I say, it is time to come back to the synagogue. We've become too comfortable being apart. Volunteering for committees, showing up at meetings, planning for large gatherings, that used to be our day-to-day business. Every day at Temple used to look the way it's looked over these last 2 months. We enjoyed it, and we were good at it. And it kept us connected to each other, perhaps the most important thing of all. Bulletins and emails are important, but the real fabric of a Jewish community has always been what happens in person. That's where relationships are created and maintained. That is where we see a person's reaction, where we notice their joys and their discomforts. We are not a people meant to live in a long-distance relationship. And yet, out of necessity, that is what we have done. We look at our community today and we realize that we may live in the same zip code, but we may as well be across an ocean. It is time to come back to the synagogue, time to come back to being in the presence of a vibrant Jewish community. But it's not simple these days. So we've done our best to build a place of refuge, like Mordechai Noah implied. A place safe from all of the threats we face in our world today, threats that 10 years ago we probably wouldn't have even known how to name. But it's not enough. It is not enough just to have a safe place where we can pray outside to be safe from COVID, where we can be protected inside from threats that enter synagogues in our world today. We have to invite each other back into communal Jewish life. And not only because Jewish communal life has a lot to offer, which it does, and not just because we desperately want to fill all of the seats in all of our spaces, which of course we do. We come back to in-person Judaism for 2 reasons. The first is the simplest. It's better. It is better in person. I know there are very good and very real reasons to stay at home today. Many of us are sick. Many of us are at risk of becoming sick. And while many of us avoid COVID and other diseases because we don't want our life to be inconvenienced, some of us don't have that privilege. COVID for some is a life and death threat. And so we have to understand that that is just a new reality. And a different reality, some of us really like praying in our PJs. We're tired on Friday night, and our couch is comfortable, and the wine pours freely. I cannot imagine a time in the future when we will not live stream our services or our programs. You will always be able to have a Shabbat in your PJs with a glass of wine on your couch. But that doesn't change the simple fact it's better in person. Hearing the cantor lead our prayers in person, better. No matter what sound system you have at home, it's better here. Praying words that others pray with you by the dozens, more powerful than praying them alone. This is how our prayers were intended to be said, which is why even the most challenging prayers to say, like Mourner's Kaddish, have always required that we say them with others. The second reason we come back to Jewish communal life, because Jewish communal life has never been solely about what I receive from the community. It's been first and foremost about what my presence does for others when I'm a part of the Jewish community. When God asked Moses to build the very first Mishkan, the first Jewish sacred space that we know of, his famous words were, "Build it so that I may be there, so that I can dwell among you." We've never built sacred spaces solely as pieces of art to be observed. A Jewish sanctuary is intended to be used. Your presence in this space makes a difference. It makes a difference to the person who shows up from out of town to say Kaddish. It makes a difference to those of us on the Bima who look out and actually get to see your faces. It makes a difference because more often than not, the casual words you share with someone in our hallway or our parking lot lead to some mitzvah somewhere in the future. A hospital visit, a phone call, an idea for a social justice project, or a teen program. The Mishkan that will be finished soon beside our building, it in fact can't be finished until we start using it, until we dwell in that space. Its design is beautiful. It has a Ner Tamid and an ark so that it can be a symbol of sacred space. Its design is personal. It has the names of our people, those whom we know and love, some of whom we miss, Donald and Estelle, for whom it's been dedicated, but also, as many of you have dedicated pavers that will be at the entryway, it will be names that we recognize, and yet still not complete until we fill it with people in person. As Mordechai Noah learned 200 years ago, you can't build something and wait for people to join you. People show up when they are invited, especially when they are invited personally with sincerity by those they love and trust. So Keith invited Sue. Sue invited Greg. McMains invited some of their friends, some of the people they hadn't met. They all said yes. Because of your passion, your sincerity, your commitment to the future of this community. And so now it is our turn. It is time to invite people back to our services, to our sanctuaries, plural now, to this special place where we love to gather. Time for our long-distance relationship to be over. It is time, when possible, for us to be face-to-face, because it is better, because we have something to offer, because that has always been the heart of our community. We give thanks for the sanctuary that we have built. God, may the day come soon when this dream is completed, fulfilled by the presence of the members of our community, gathering together, young and old, to celebrate the joys of life and our tradition together. Shabbat Shalom.